Last Years of Merlin. Tonight we're on chapter 26, which is called The Town of the Bards. In the last chapter, Emrys and Shim crossed the river unceasing into the Blighted Lands, and they found a dilapidated orchard, and then they almost got caught by goblins, but a very kind ditch digger named Han hid them in his ditch and gave them a dagger and sent them on their way with a warning that they should probably change their plans. They are on their way to the Shrouded Castle to try to save Rhea. All right, the Town of the Bards. I strode across the tundra, trekking toward the rising waves of the dark hills. My satchel of herbs felt heavier, now that it also carried Han's dagger. As my boots crunched on the dry, crusty soil, my staff clicked against the ground. Every so often, my shoulder rubbed against the staff's knotty top, and I caught a faint scent of hemlock. Shim, grumbling to himself about madness, struggled to keep pace with me, but I would not slow down for him. We had no time to lose. Over and over the goblin's words, "better off dead," echoed in my mind. Despite the blades of grass, clumps of bracken, and groves of scraggly trees that managed to survive on this tundra, the dominant colors of this plain, stretching to the dark horizon, were dull grays and browns, tinged with rust. Several times I looked over my shoulder at the fading green hills of Druma Wood, trying to recall the lushness of that land. As the sun sank lower against our backs, our shadows grew longer and darker. I noticed in the distance a stand of dark, leafless trees. Then, drawing nearer, I realized the truth. What had looked like trunks and limbs were really the skeletons of houses and stables, all that remained of a village about the size of Caer Vedwid. No people or animals were left. The buildings had been burned to the ground. The stone walls had been torn apart. By the side of the ash-strewn road through the village, a wooden cradle, once the bed of a child, lay in splinters. Why this village had been destroyed, no one remained to tell. We pushed on toward the dark hills. Although I stretched both my ears and my second sight for any sign of goblins, I found none. But that was no cause to relax. The first hint of sunset already streaked the sky. In another hour, night would fall. I could only imagine what creatures might prowl this terrain after dark. Meanwhile, Shim fell further behind. He kept stopping to rest. I kept urging him to move. His strength was ebbing, just like my vision. Reluctantly, I concluded we would need to find some sort of shelter before the day ended. Where, though? This desolate place didn't offer many choices. We continued to trek over the long, gradual rises and depressions of the land. As our shadows grew, so did my fears. Strange, howling sounds, half wolf and half wind, reached our ears. Despite my pleas, Shim lagged ever more. At last, as I topped a rise, I glimpsed a village below. Warm yellow torches blazed in the streets, while fires burned in the hearths of low houses made of mud brick. My mouth watered when I realized that the smell of burning wood mingled with roasting grain. Shim approached and traded glances with me. With a joyful cry, he started running down to the village gates. Clumsily, but full of hope, I ran after him. A man, sitting on the ground by the gates, suddenly leaped to his feet as we came near. He was tall and gaunt, and he held a spear. He wore a simple tunic. A thick black beard covered most of his face, but his unusually dark eyes were his most striking feature. Even in the dwindling light, his eyes shone eerily. Yet I could not shake the feeling that their light came less from intelligence than from fear. Indeed, his eyes seemed nearly crazed, like the eyes of an animal frightened to the very edge of death. Bracing himself, the man pointed his spear at my chest. Though he said nothing, his expression was grim. "We come in peace," I declared. "We are strangers in this land, and seek only some shelter for the night." The man's large eyes opened still wider, but he said nothing. Instead, he thrust his spear closer, nicking the wood of my staff and barely missing my hand. "We is hungry," moaned Shim. "Hungry and sleepily." Again, the silent man thrust his spear at us. Only then did I notice the sign behind him, hanging at an angle from one of the gate posts. Carved into the weathered slab of wood, it read, "Welcome to Caer Nithin, Town of the Bards." Below that were inscribed the words, "Here song is ever," but the phrases that followed had been damaged somehow. I could not be sure, but they seemed to have been scraped away. Through the gates, I watched a woman, tall and dark like the man, scurry across the town square. Before she slipped into one of the houses, she paused to beckon to two children, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, their black hair falling over their shoulders. They darted up to her, and the door closed with a slam. It struck me as odd that we heard the padding of their bare feet, but not their voices. The woman, as well as the children, were as silent as the man with the spear. Then I realized that, in this entire village, not a single voice could be heard. No babies crying, no friends laughing, no neighbors arguing over the price of wheat, the cause of lice, or the likelihood of rain. No sounds of rage or joy or sorrow. No voices at all. The man jabbed again with his spear, nearly brushing the folds of my tunic. I backed slowly away, still pondering the eerie glow of his eyes. Through my frown, I said to him, "Whatever happened to you in your village, I am sorry." The spear slashed the air again near my chest. "Come, Shim, we are not welcome here." The little giant whimpered, but turned to follow me. We trudged across the tundra, as wordless as the town of the bards. In time we left its flickering torches far behind, though its sorrowful silence continued to cling to us. Behind us, sunset draped a curtain of rich purple over Druma Wood. Before us, the dark night swiftly deepened. I reluctantly gave up hope of finding any shelter on this featureless plain, yet I knew that I must keep searching, right up to the moment I could no longer see my own staff. Otherwise, like whatever creatures howled hungrily in the distance, Shim and I would have to spend the night in the open. At that moment, I spotted a shape of some sort ahead. It appeared to be a rock, and on that rock, a person. As we approached, I saw to my surprise that it was a girl. She looked a few years younger than Rhea. Swinging her bare feet, she sat on the rock, watching the purples and blues streak the darkening sky. She did not seem at all afraid to see approaching travelers. "Hello," she tossed her brown curls that reached almost to her waist. A playful smile illuminated her face. Cautiously, I drew closer. "Hello." "Would you like to watch the sunset with me?" "Thank you, but no." I studied her bright, exuberant eyes, so different from the eyes of the man we had just left. "Shouldn't you be getting back to your home? It's rather late." "Oh, no," she chirped. "I love watching the sunset from here." I stepped nearer. "Where is your home?" The girl giggled shyly. "I'll tell you if you tell me where you're going." Perhaps because of her friendly manner, or because she reminded me a little of Rhea, I felt drawn toward this spirited girl. I wanted to speak with her, if only for a moment. I could pretend, in some remote corner of my heart, that I was once more speaking with Rhea herself. And if her village was somewhere nearby, we might yet find a shelter for the night. "Where are you going?" she repeated. I smiled. "Oh, wherever my shadow may lead me." She giggled once more. "Your shadow will disappear fairly soon." "As will yours. You should go home before it gets any darker." "Don't worry, my village lies just over that rise there." While we spoke, Shim edged nearer to the rock on which she sat. Perhaps he too felt drawn to her, for the same reasons as I. For her part, she did not seem to notice his approach. Then, for whatever reason, he halted and slowly started backing away. Thinking nothing of Shim's movements, I asked the girl, "Do you think it might be possible for us to stay in your village tonight?" She threw her head back with a hearty laugh. "Of course!" My spirits lifted. We had found shelter after all. Just then, Shim tugged on the bottom of my tunic. As I bent down, the little giant whispered, "I isn't sure, but I think something is strangely about her hands." "What?" "Her hands." Not expecting to find anything, I glanced quickly at the girl's hands. At first, I saw nothing strange, and yet they did seem somehow different, in a way I couldn't quite define. Suddenly I knew. Her fingers are webbed. The Alea bird. Rhea's warning that shifting wraiths always show some flaw of some kind. I reached for the dagger Han had given me. Too late. The girl had already begun to metamorphose into the shape of a serpent. Her brown eyes transformed to red, her skin to scales, her mouth to ruthless jaws. Even as the wraith leaped at my face, a thin veil of discarded skin crackled as it floated to the ground. I drew the knife barely in time to lash out as the serpent bowled me over backwards. Shim shrieked. We rolled on the tundra, a knot of teeth and tail and arms and legs. I could feel the wraith's claws digging into the flesh of my right arm. Then, almost as swiftly as it had started, the battle stopped. Our two entwined bodies lay utterly still on the ground. "Amris," said Shim meekly, "is you dead?" Slowly I stirred. I extracted myself from the grasp of the serpent, whose throat had been slashed open by the dagger. Rancid-smelling blood poured out of the gash and down the scaled belly. Weakly, I staggered over to the rock and propped myself against it, clutching my wounded arm. Shim looked at me admiringly. "You ha' saved us." I shook my head. "Plain luck saved us. That, and one observant little giant." Okay, well that was the end of chapter 26. So tomorrow we will read chapter 27 at 9 p.m. Pacific time. Look how far we are in the book. So close. So I hope you all are enjoying it. I'll see you tomorrow.